Hello everyone and welcome back. Today, me and my friend and very talented narrator beside the dying fire, we prepared 6 scary stories to listen to at work. Show him some love by subscribing to his channel. The link is in the description and on the end of this video. Before we begin, a quick reminder. For art prints and original drawings and paintings, don't forget to visit my shop. The link is in the description. Also, my next video will be uploaded on Sunday, May 6th, and will be a big compilation of scary stories to listen to before bed. But for now, guys, get ready and grab your flashlight, 'cause you are about to step into the darkness. A friend of mine recently committed suicide. It came as a complete shock. She never seemed conflicted or like she was having a hard time. But I guess that is the nature of depression. Getting through these last couple of weeks have been hard, but also puzzling. No less so because of the note that my friend left behind. I don't understand it. The man in 5A. Boarding groups A through C, please come to the gate now. The words sounded lifeless to Maggie, even as she was saying them. God, did she despise the red eye. She would have to stay up night, which screwed up her sleep and gave her dark circles under her eyes, and furthermore, she would have to endure the mouth breathers that were the bargain flyers. No one actually wanted to fly from Copenhagen to Barcelona at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday mid-February. Absolutely no one. So the people who were shuffling onto the plane amid exhausted yawns and black stares were less than excited to be going anywhere. What children was on the plane at this hour? But more so than any of this, everyone just looked poor. A more politically correct person might have called them comfortable. But all Maggie could see, through her fake smile, were filthy people trying to squeeze that last enjoyment out of life before eventually dying of heart disease. Needless to say, Maggie was not a big fan of the red eye. That was until she seated the man in 5A. The first thing she noticed about the guy, that was uncommonly well put together. His jacket must have been designer, since it fit so well, and he wore one of those hats that you might have seen in an old gangster movie. He spoke in a soft voice, even though he didn't say much as Maggie seated him. In fact, he was almost too polite. Maggie didn't see his face, as it was obscured by the hat, but she remembered thinking that this flight might not be so bad after all. One good thing about the red eye was that the most people fell asleep rather fast. She mostly had to go through the motions of offering people their complimentary drinks as she walked through the aisles. Very few of them seemed to want to be disturbed. This night was a bit different though. She was anticipating the man in 5A. She desperately wanted to see his face. She had been spending most of the flight trying to figure out what he might look like. In her mind, he looked like a cross between several hunky movie stars with just a splash of those Instagram models thrown in. She made her way to his seat timidly, trying not to disturb him if he actually was asleep. But as she approached, she could see that he had started watching a movie on his screen. She didn't recognize the film, and she was a bit surprised that the catalog of movies provided on the flight included black and white stuff. What she saw were those new Hollywood things. Yet, what he was watching was some black and white oldie, where a man in old face makeup was playing chess. She didn't think much of it, though. She reached 5A, her stomach aflutter. She was hoping that he was handsome. She could use something uplifting to keep her going for the rest of the flight. "Can I offer you a refreshment?" she said. "Of course, Maggie," the man said, his face still hid under the hat. She hasn't told him her name, and she didn't wear a name tag. How had he known her name? "How did you—" Maggie started to ask, and that was when the man in 5A looked up at her. She had expected a handsome face. She would even have taken a torn of burnt-up face. What she didn't expect was seeing no face at all. There was nothing. The man had no face. The skin stretched over his skull seemed frail and papery, with tiny visible veins running from the base of his neck and through to where his mouth should have been. Maggie tried to keep her cool. She had been taught to remain polite under all circumstances. This was after all the red eye, and some weirdos were bound to be coming through. She composed herself, trying not to look at his face. "What would you like?" The tremors in her voice became impossible to disguise. "Could you—" The man seemed to hesitate, as though he was mulling it over. "Could you get a glass of water and spit into it, then bring it back here?" The request seemed genuine. He even said it like there was nothing odd about it. But nevertheless, a chill ran down Maggie's spine. She tried to make eye contact with the two passengers sitting on either side of him, but they were both fast asleep. Could I what?" Maggie asked, trying and failing to hide her disgust. "Could you take one of those plastic cups, fill it up with water and spit into that, then bring it back? That would refresh me." The man explained patiently. He never broke eye contact throughout the entire conversation, even though there were no eyes there to stare back at her. I'm sorry, sir," Maggie said in the most composed voice she could come up with. "That would not be sanitary," she said, struggling to find the words. "What a shame," said the man, with real regret in his voice. "This could be your final flight, and I don't want to have to do anything regretful," he said, mimicking the way that Maggie had hesitated. "What does that—" Maggie started, but cut herself off because the man had looked away, once again transfixed by the screen. It seemed that the conversation was over. Maggie looked up, confused. She started to slowly push the trolley down the aisle, completely ignoring the rest of the passengers. Maggie took a seat at the back of the plane, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had she really just seen a man without a face? It couldn't be. It just couldn't. People had faces. If he hadn't had one, then how did he breathe? How did he drink? How did he eat? It simply couldn't be. Maggie was suddenly furious. What kind of request was that? What kind of pervert would ask someone to spit in a cup? Who did he think he was? Had he threatened her? Maggie was just about to set up to go confront the man when she felt something on her cheek. It was a sharp pain, followed by a tearing sound. Maggie left a sharp yelp and got up. She meant to rush to the bathroom, but the sight of blood on the carpet beneath her made her stop. What was going on? Another sharp pain, this time under her eye. She rushed into the bathroom, passing several terrified-looking passengers on the way. She opened the door to the bathroom just as another pain was gripping her in the jaw. The ripping sounds were becoming more frequent. Maggie looked up to her own reflection, praying to God that this was all in her head. It wasn't. Her right cheek, from her eye to her jaw, had been ripped open, seemingly from the inside. They were multiplying fast. The last thing Maggie heard was her own gargled scream as the growth took over her entire face. She never heard anything else ever again. This story had been typed out neatly and placed next to my friend's bed. However, she had scribbled the words, "He won't leave me alone," underneath the last paragraph.
We've been in this house almost 2 months now. I love it. 5 acres and a lovely home. Great place to raise my kids. Then I met my neighbor across the road. Turns out his daughter lives to our left, nephew to our right, sister 2 houses one way, brother 3 houses the other way. Not uncommon, but still interesting to learn. The guy's 82, but looks and acts like he's 60. He's also the most racist, sexist person I've ever met. He told us our yard is to be mowed every 5 days. This is farmland. There is no HOA, and my yard is hayfield we're baling. That I am not to address him directly, but to have my husband call or go through his wife if we need anything. He said I should grow my hair out as to look more motherly. I just smiled and nodded, attributing his attitude to age. Days later, a knock on the door. A gentleman introduces himself as a neighbor diagonally across the street, hands me a Bible and says everyone on the street attends a certain church. His smile is all teeth. Everything about him screams sleazeball. Turns, still grinning, to walk down my porch steps, saying, "See you there Sunday," before I can even answer. Saturday, my husband is outside when a car pulls up. First neighbor's wife walks right into my house like she owns the place, gasps at the Halloween decorations, and asks to speak to the woman of the house privately outside. Yeah, outside sounds like a great idea, I snapped, more than a little agitated. Again, I consider age. Among the topics were, you need to mow the yard. My husband is going to tell yours that you've been driving and walking out of the yard to get the mail. You need to take down those skeletons, they're vulgar. I will be babysitting your infant son twice a week for 5 hours, since he is the first, and I shit you not, her exact words, fresh blood in the area in a long time. At this point, my mama bear becomes way stronger than my southern manners, so I stand up and tell her to leave. She seems unfazed, telling me I need to be more ladylike, so I tell her, leave or I call the cops. She huffs and leaves. She or her husband have parked in the road and stared down my house twice now. The church fellow has left us handwritten letters in our mail every week since the first Sunday. We missed you at church this Sunday. You need to be here this week. I already went to the cops for whatever good it did me. I feel like I moved into the Wrong Turn movies.
I work as a home health aide. My schedule is pretty typical. I have the same clients on the same days every week. Once in a while, though, I'll get a call from the office to do a fill-in. Typically, I can whistle my way out of it. I work nearly 60 hours a week, so you bet your bottom dollar I'll try to whistle my way out of it. This one, however, was an emergency. I was the last person they had called, and it was for another overshift. And it was for an overnight shift. I really didn't want to fucking work this. I'd left home at 9 that morning, and it was already creeping on 11 p.m. They tempted me with double time, and they'd cover my shifts for the next 2 days. That sounded fine by me. If only I had known then what I know now. For those who aren't sure or who don't know what a home health aide is, I basically work with the elderly. I'm often doing housework, personal care, or I'll cook for them. Whatever is in their care plan, often determined by an outside agency. My clients are pretty agreeable, mild-mannered, easygoing, and easy to get along with. This client for this fill-in? Nope. This old bat was the nastiest woman I had ever encountered on the job. No notes on her care plan, but she was hard of hearing, so I could not understand why she kept fucking yelling at me. Only, I figured it out. She was a grumpy, bitter old woman. She was mad that I was late. Her normal caregiver is there around 9 to make her dinner, and here it is, 11:30, and I've just only shown up. After apologizing and trying to explain, I give up and I make her food per her instructions. I clean up the kitchen, feed her cat, help her get ready for bed, and prepared for a long night of making sure nothing goes wrong. When you're a caregiver, you're not allowed to sleep on the job. After an already long day, I wanted nothing more than to fall the fuck asleep. Do you know what I mean? Starting at 9 a.m. and ending at 9 a.m. the next morning. It is a shitty shift, but I was getting paid. Anyway, a few hours passed. Somehow I fallen asleep on her couch. I could tell because it was 2 a.m. My phone was on my face. My glasses were on my face too. I don't know what it was that woke me up, but I was alert now. I checked on the client and she was sound asleep to a low-playing television. Her cat meowed at me like it was telling me to go the fuck away. Or, take a picture, it lasts longer, pervert. Then I heard a series of bumps. This was perhaps what had woken me up. Perhaps it was the smell creeping through every square inch of this tiny house. What the fuck was that? I went and checked on the client again, assuming she had an accident in her sleep. Well, it was my lucky day today. No sleep, no food, and I was currently spending the night with a woman who could not control her bowels. Or she could, and she was just an aggressive shitter and really wanted to show me who's the boss. I woke her briefly to change her. She was a bit more agreeable at this point, though, as I left to let her sleep, she sat straight up in the bed, her finger pointed behind me, and her mouth opened in this silent scream. Slowly I turned, my blood turning to ice. Her silent scream gained volume, piercing my eardrums. At the window, I spied the silhouette of a man, illuminated by a streetlight. I could see him peering in the front window. "What are you doing? Get out of here!" I shouted at him. His eyes widened and he took off running. I sprinted to the door and locked it and dialed 911 to report the incident. I also said I was just a nighttime caregiver and I'd be waiting by the door as I really didn't want to disturb the client any further. "Where's Black Cat?" I hear the client from back in her bedroom. "I'm sure he's around here somewhere, ma'am," I reply. As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt queasy. A bad taste settled on my tongue. The police took a while to arrive. Perhaps no one was on patrol in this area. Who knew? I didn't. I opened the door a crack for them. I wanted to see their badges. I wanted to make sure I knew who I was dealing with before I went out onto the porch with them. I really didn't want to upset the client further. They asked me to show them where he had been standing, what he had been doing. Everything leading up to that point where I was located when he was spotted. This, that, and the other thing. I repeated the whole story a few times that night. Is there anything missing from the house? The question seemed strange at the time, but now that I'm thinking a little clearer, it doesn't. I was fast asleep. The client was asleep. Was anything missing? "The cat seems to be missing," I said. "I'll keep an eye out for him." They wished me good night and said they'd keep a patrol car around the neighborhood just in case. Now I'm in the house. It's dark, it's unsettling, and it's fucking quiet. I'm creeped out of my skin at this point. I want to go home. I want to sleep in my own bed. I want a shower. I want breakfast in bed with my lovely wife and my 2 cats and the dog. I want out of this goddamned house. "Black Cat?" I whispered. I wanted to find this damn animal. Perhaps my client's screaming chased him upstairs. My client could not go upstairs due to mobility issues, but that didn't mean it wasn't free range for this fella. I searched and searched and searched. Then I heard them again. A series of bumps, but they sounded like they were coming from downstairs. My eyes teared up. I felt frozen in place. Then came the bumps again, and again. Louder and louder and louder. It sounded like bare feet running on hard floors, and I covered my own mouth to muffle my scream. I feel something move past me. Quickly. It feels more like a warm breeze, only this breeze had rain. It wasn't rain. It was a wet slap in the face. I found Black Cat. Trying not to alarm the client, I peeked my head into her room to check on her, still fast asleep. Perhaps I am the one having a mental breakdown. Perhaps I'm having a very vivid dream due to the lack of sleep. Perhaps I am in a nice padded van, on my way to the bin. There they fucking are again. Those fucking bums. They're slow this time. Upstairs, they seem like pacing. I see a light coming down the stairwell, and I know better than to investigate. I call the cops again. They arrive within minutes, must have been rounding the corner. I let them in. I direct them upstairs. Moments later, they return. A large evidence bag holds Black Cat, bless his kitty soul, and the source of the bombs is handcuffed and led to the back of a police car. The man from earlier in the evening, apparently he had been watching my client's house for some time. He had been calling her, writing her love letters, and just stalking her. I didn't think he'd come back. I never did figure out how he got into the damn house. Maybe I fell asleep again. I do know, though, that he killed the wrong cat. Black Cat showed up on the porch when I left in the morning, and he was as rude as any cat. I let him in and got in my car. I called work on my way home in the morning and quit. I went home and had breakfast in bed with my beautiful wife, our 2 cats, and our 2 dogs. I've not been back to the neighborhood since.
So this happened earlier this year, and as a little background, I'm a 30-year-old male, married, 29 at the time, with a young daughter. I live in a rural Northern California town, pretty much right in the epicenter of the gold rush. And I don't know if it's all the ways the land was taken or the ways people killed for wealth back then, but it's always seemed to have a higher share of strange recluses and sovereign citizen types. That being said, this is not a haunting story, or strange people of the woods, but it was by far the most frightening encounter I've experienced as a father. Some time ago, I ended up with an extra day off, and my wife and I decided to go for a drive and check out a semi-local gun show. From time to time, I will get tables at them, and have friends who do them regularly, so we went to visit, as I'm always looking for obscure parts and pieces for old military weapons, and had some family that lived in that area of the show too. We had a hell of a winter last year, so unsurprisingly it was a cold, gloomy day. We drove about an hour, and I knew the promoters, so I walked right in. As I was passing tables in search of the right stuff, I was carrying my daughter with me. She was very small and ridiculously cute, so everyone wanted to look and ask about her, which is normal from what I've observed for parents. At times, you even draw a small crowd, usually of sweet LOLs, meaning little old ladies, and some grandpa types. As a side point, I had one grumpy lady tell me she was way too young. I looked at her confused and said she's like 3 months old and she'll never remember. Back on topic, there was one man who seemed a bit more excited than most men his age, but he said that he worked as an EMT and in an NCIU for years, so it seemed reasonable that he was so happy to see healthy babies. As the afternoon went on, he passed me a few more times, moving against the crowd, first sign, and commented on how beautiful she was. As babies often do at that age, my wife soon needed to breastfeed our daughter. We went out to the car and had blinders in the back seat so she could have privacy and keep the baby from distractions. I turned on the heater, locked the doors, and went back in to help a buddy sell during a busier point. About 10 to 15 minutes later, my phone starts ringing with my frantic wife on the other end. About 3 minutes before I had noticed that law enforcement had gotten up and walked outside of the show. It took a minute to calm her down, but apparently the guy had followed us outside and had been watching closely. My wife got the sudden feeling that makes your hair stand up while feeding her in the car. That was when she saw a shadow standing outside her door, blocking it from opening, holding a small metal tube, a mag-light flashlight. At that same moment, a sheriff pulled up who had also seen us go to the car. The officer asked what was going on, and the man tried to say he was talking to my wife, who rolled the window down slightly and said she was not, and didn't want to either. The officer asked him his name, and when he turned around to run the name, he tried to scurry away. The name was a fake, hence why the other officers got up. Detained, he gave his real name, and within 1 minute of calling it, the man was turned around and arrested. Turned out he had felony warrants for kidnappings. The man was waiting for the nearby cars to leave, and he was about to try to take my wife and infant daughter. Had that cop not been right there, who knows how it would have unfolded. Luckily, there was a cop there when we needed one.
So this actually happened to me a while ago, 4 or 5 months ago, but I only recently thought to post it here. I assure you, this is 100% genuine, and thinking back, I should have been more scared than I was. So, I worked at a local supermarket. It's a fairly large franchise on the east coast of America. The store in question is named Waze. It's sort of a higher-end Walmart on the east coast. I absolutely hated that job. The people were great, but they gave me absolutely awful hours and the customers were ridiculous. But that's a story for another time. Anyway, I and my manager, who I actually consider a friend, were working the 5 p.m. to midnight shift. As I normally do, the store closes at 11, but we stay to clean up and lock everything. Anyway, I showed up at 5 with my manager Logan. We usually show up at the same time and get a soda before our shift and talk about what games we're hyped for. The store was completely dead. There was maybe 3 cars in the parking lot, not counting employees, so we took our time. After we got inside, the current manager of duty asked Logan to talk privately, so he went with her and I replaced the current cashier. At this time, we only had 1 cashier on duty. Anyway, a few minutes pass and I haven't seen a single customer to this point, which isn't strange. The Logan comes back and the previous manager clocks out. Afterwards, Logan comes over to tell me about the guy. Apparently, he showed up around noon and spent the better part of 5 hours wandering the aisles and scaring customers. When the previous manager called the store manager, Derek, about it, he told her to leave him be unless he started acting strangely. We got on talking for a few seconds when a guy enters my aisle. He was probably in his mid-late 30s, balding, and was really short and heavy-set. He also smelled weird. I assumed he was checking out, so I greeted him, but he just walked right past me and towards Logan, where he got in his face, not aggressively, but as if so casually talk, but he was literally centimeters from his face, and says, "Hey, my name is Michael, I'm not thief." Then he gave him a pen. I asked him if he needed help finding anything, and he said no, I'm okay, and walked off. Needless to say, that was the guy we were warned about. At the time, we found it amusing, and it was our topic of discussion for that night. A few more hours pass. All the while, customers are asking about the guy, and he is still walking around. One old woman in particular was telling Logan how she actually felt afraid of him, so he called the Derek again to tell him about the guy for a second time. I guess he told Logan to tell the guy to leave, or we'd forced to call the police. Easier said than done. Thinking back, Derek should have done more than push the guy onto us. A 20-year-old cashier and a 22-year-old floor manager. Anyway, he called the guy to the front desk over the loudspeaker. I was on aisle 1, so I am right next to the desk. The guy must have known we were going to kick him out, because he went into hiding. Our logic at the time was as long as he's not disturbing customers, then we'll deal with it later. Obviously, we shouldn't have. But put yourself in our shoes. We're the only 2 workers, there's only maybe 5 customers in the store, and one of them is batshit insane. You'd avoid a confrontation as well. Another hour or so passes. It's now just past 9:30, and the store is completely dead. We called in the ghost town shift, but this time, we were debating whether or not we needed to call the police. We knew that we should. but we hadn't even bothered to look for the guy. So, we called his name over the loudspeaker again, this time telling him we are about to call the police. As expected, that got his attention. Other employees had told me later that he had been hiding in the storage area behind the grocery section. The only way to get back there was through the doors, but they're locked at this time, so he forced himself through the shelves in the diary section in the back of the store, nearly breaking an entire shelf. When he got to the front desk, he explained to Logan that he is from Indiana and was instructed by God to drive east. So he did, and when he ran out of gas, he walked until he found the first store. And fortunately, that was our store. After some discussion, we convinced him to let us call the police to help him out. The police arrived and we closed the store early. It turns out he had been released from his psychiatric ward to be in the care of his father. They gave the okay, but then he stole his father's car and just started driving like God commanded him to. I am not sure what happened next, but I've been told that his father had to drive down to pick him up, where he is now under his father's care. Additionally, it turns out the guy took a nice steamy shit in the storage area as well, which some poor worker needed to clean up. There were other multiple crazy things that happened at that store. I only worked there for 5 months, but I've gotten some crazy stories from that job. This is just one of the few.
TV shows and movies usually depict abductors driving white or black vans. I didn't realize this until I decided to buy a white 1994 Dodge Ram cargo van to haul some of the gear I needed for work. While driving it, I've been pulled over by cops and searched 3 times for no reason, but that is another story. The point is, some people see vans as suspicious. One day, while returning home, a woman pushing a stroller stared at me for a long time while I drove along my home street. We have speed bumps, and I had a lot of expensive, delicate gear in the van, so I was driving very slow. She stared at me, wide-eyed the entire time, so I smiled at her, like a friendly neighbor does. She was staring so intently she almost walked the stroller right off the edge of the curb. I thought it was funny and almost forgot about it. A week later, our HOA email thread heats up when a resident sends out a notice that his wife and toddler were being stalked by a man in a white van. Fearing a pitchfork and torch mob mistaking me for the creeper, I replied to all saying I live in the neighborhood and also drive a white van. I even provided my license plate number and home address. Big mistake. Jokingly, I added I also witnessed a suspicious person in the neighborhood. A woman with a stroller who was staring at me so long and hard it made me uncomfortable. I provided the date and time of the incident to see if their alleged stalker was actually me. It was. Dude got triggered. He started sending email after email, CCing everyone on the list, telling me he can read between the lines of what I was saying. His accusations became more and more ludicrous and turned into personal attacks. Several neighbors on the email list replied that he was behaving badly. The emails eventually stopped, but things got even weirder. On several occasions, while out walking my dog, a 10-ish-year-old girl would come out of her house, run over to me, awkwardly chat me up about my dog, and give me strangely intimate details of her life. I wondered why this child was talking to strangers, but thought that maybe she just knew me from the neighborhood, so I politely played along. Then one day the girl shows up at my house. She said she was angry because her dad wouldn't let her have a dog like mine, so she wanted to visit my dog for a while. I told her I needed to talk to her parents before I could ever let her visit my home like this. She said okay and left, and I never saw her anymore. I have 2 daughters, and one of their friends told me the girl who was chatting me up is the daughter of the triggered dude from the HOA email list. he had been sending her out to talk to me and taking pictures. My daughter's friend was friends with this bait girl. The poor girl's dad was making his own daughter uncomfortable, which is why she confided in her friend. The dad was sending his daughter out to chat with me so he could accuse me of I don't even know what. One detail I forgot to mention. I have dash cams in all my vehicles and CCTV monitoring my front door. So the initial incident with the wife, as well as the girl coming to my door, were recorded. I emailed the triggered dude and kindly offered him copies of the videos of each incident. I also told him I was concerned that his daughter was behaving inappropriately towards strangers. Apparently, this scuttled his plan, as I never heard from him again.
Hey there, and thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. And if you like my videos and want to see more, subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my Friends Beside the Dying Fire channel. The link is in the description. Do you want to share your story or say hi? You can find my email below. Don't forget to follow me on my social media for behind the scenes videos. Take care, and I will see you all in my next video.